So, Diessa Plateau, this is map 2 for the Char characters. Norn can end up finding themselves over here a little bit as well if they're expanding off on the east. Really fun map with lots to do. We're actually starting from a weird angle here. We're starting from Wayfarer, the portal on the top left. I guess starting on the corner of the map is nice for an efficient map completion, but that would have worked if we were on the bottom left corner too, down near the exit to the Black Citadel, which is where I usually begin this map from. Today we're just going to be running through, showing how to get 100% map completion, and discussing memories, cool bits of trivia about the open world. Footage was submitted by TechZoon. So let's jump in immediately with some Guild Wars 1 talk. This area right here, I'll pull up the map, is a beautiful map as far as laying over Guild Wars 1 stuff. In fact, the Diessa Plateau in Guild Wars 2 is sitting very neatly on top of what was known as the Diessa Lowlands in Guild Wars 1. And so much stuff lines up almost exactly to how it was in the original game. It's a real treat. Particularly, there was an outpost here called the Grenditch Courthouse in the original game, and it does return in the sequel now a ruin of a different sort, but you get to explore. You get to go underneath or into like an interior room that was never available before. It's fantastic. I guess we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, let's just take our Mesmer up to the top leftmost section of the map to deal with assisting the Iron Legion up here. And it's Dredge, which kind of sucks, honestly. I mean, look, I think that when you do weird pairings, that can provide something fun and something curious. So pairing the Char with the Dredge does feel like a weird pairing to me. That's probably why we saw that become a big storyline in Season 1. But when it comes to the matter of beating hearts, there's nothing really fun here. It's not like we're really amongst a bunch of Char that there's loads of supporting dialogue talking about what the Char think of the Dredge and maybe how they have a common shared enemy amongst with the Norns, so they like them a bit more or whatever. We may as well just be in a Shiver Peak map here, taking out generic Dredge in a generic mine area. At least here we've got an event, but I mean, what are we doing? We're recovering sledgehammers? Like, cool. Those couldn't have been the Norn. Actually, I guess you don't really see the Norn doing big mine scale excavation style stuff, so that again is where like there's some richness in pairing these two races together. But yeah, not the most compelling of hearts. And in fact, there's two of them next to each other. There's the very top left heart, which we just got done. And then as we move along, we're going to be in like another quarry type area, which is also fairly boring. Some nice events here though. Let's talk about the fact that we're in range of a meta, the Dredge Assault. Well, this is one of those, like, sort of half-baked metas that people can easily forget about. If you took 100 Guild Wars 2 players and asked us all 100 to list out, not even their favourite metas, just list out some Guild Wars 2 metas, the odds that they'll actually say the Dredge Assault on this map is near zero. Really, I doubt any of 100 people, random fans, would be thinking of this one at all. They're just localised events up in this general area. They don't culminate in some big spectacle. They are fun. Like, you get some cool, like, barricade moments where you get to break through some fortifications that have been built. And anywhere that there's dredge technology like their APCs and stuff, I tend to enjoy somewhat. But it's largely overshadowed by the existence of another meta event that's super close. And it's in that building there on the left, Meetoberfest. So, Meetoberfest didn't really exist in Guild Wars 1 lore. But come Guild Wars 2, they dedicated this whole section of this map to this festival about meat and about drinking, and it's very Char. It's brilliant. I know I, for one, and many others have kind of wanted to see it be expanded into a full-fledged festival, but I doubt that will ever happen, especially with some of the more recent developments. The devs have kind of drawn a line in the sand, it almost feels like, for adding new festivals, and they've probably exhausted everything they need to in terms of spreading a good amount of festivals all around the game, real-world, year-wide. But hey, you never know. It's a part of the lore now. And perhaps one day, if there were a Guild Wars 3 or a spin-off game or something, Meetoberfest could easily feature in one of those. I just like the idea of Guild Wars Tyrian festivals that aren't blatant analogues to real-life stuff. You know, Winter's Day has its own lore and its own explanation in the universe, but it is basically just Christmas / New Year. And the same with, you know, Mad King's Day and Halloween. This is, like, unique. Really, in a way. I mean, I'm not saying that something similar to this doesn't exist in the real world, but as far as a big-scale festival on the same level as, you know, Halloween or Christmas. You don't see so much. I'm sure I've angered some Germans here because this makes me think of Oktoberfest for some reason. Anyway, the heart is not too bad, and in fact, there's a ton of different activities and things you can do just because of all the events triggering with the meta in the area, where you help various festival issues. I have to say, what Texoon's doing here right now in the footage is exactly how I play this. Just run meat over to hungry people and drink over to thirsty people. And I just sort of scan very quickly all the green nameplates here and see, okay, is that guy got an unquenchable thirst? Right, he wants a drink. The other guy with the bottomless stomach, go get him some food. And yeah, you can basically just play waiter. This feels like a pretty quick way of doing things. That fight there, that meta fight to make sure Azala's poison tongue is kind of subdued, is an interesting fight because I think he dies and then it's not actually a death, it's like a phase, and then he'll go again, and then you beat him down again, and then he'll finally be quiet and he'll relax in the festival. So anyway, with that done, we can now go to the other quarry. We're kind of doing the more boring areas of Diessa here. There's a really cool mini dungeon for me to show you guys with a really beautiful artistic opening. There's this is one of those weird maps for ambient dialogue, by the way, where they don't really spread it around very well, and then suddenly they just dump a ton of it all in one location. And we'll get to that. But for now, just sort of trailing along the north. This is a cool event because it's a big old devourer. Devourers we've already seen and got a little bit familiar with as far as the Charlands are concerned over in the plains of Ashford, the first map. But siege devourers, not so much. This guy's like a siege devourer, really. And we get to fight him. You can see he's even a threat, even for us at level 80, coming back down. And his little brood can really punish us if we're not careful. Quite a common, familiar part of the map that we're in right now for most active players who are members of guilds, because there is a guild race that takes place here, and you kind of run through as a devourer, I think, through some of these caves in this general area of the map. Also, wait, did this map have a roller beetle race? I don't think it took you really up here, though. Anyway, so Bloodcliff Quarry. Another quarry filled with dredge. Feels kind of out of place. Doesn't feel very Char-like to me. But you'll see it's connected to the Dredge Assault meta here. This time we're under the effects of one of the meta events to reduce Dredge morale, and that they will have tunnels that increase their morale, and we need to destroy all of their tunnels by running over. This actually serves the act of trying to complete the Renown Heart, because it gives you more targets and more little things to do. You know, sometimes ArenaNet actually have in the event, quite often if an event spawns enemies and you kill the enemy, it helps for the heart, so they're connected in that way. But sometimes in rare situations there are events that have unique event activatables that also like hook into the heart in some way. And I'm kind of watching this footage right now wondering if this was a similar situation. It might not have been. Killing things as ever, rezzing things is a good move. You know, one of the nice things to do in a situation like this, where there's lots of piles of bodies, is to put on your open world build some kind of AoE res ability. Now, I have a full video playlist of what I believe the better open world builds are. If you're not trying to speed run things too much, if you're just trying to enjoy yourself, if you're trying to actually play story and beat bosses and stuff. And one thing I never really mentioned much is the value of AoE res skills. If what you're doing particularly is open world map completion, like we are in this series, suddenly res skills are okay, because if you can ding like 2 bodies with 1 cast, then that's some good heart progress without you having to stand around and rub the body for ages. Sneaky exit at the back of the quarry here after the vista. Now this is where the guild race takes place, and it runs you into these caves. There's a very cool and creepy skill challenge here where we eat some odd meat, some weird flesh. I always like these because there's always a fun, weird reason why we're consuming the item that we're consuming. But also, it just feels like a nice little change where you're expecting to have to work your way through a battle of some kind, be it long or short. And now you realize, oh, it's just a bit of dialogue and double-clicking something in my inventory. But this guy's really creepy, and it's called Tasty Meat, and I think the idea is, isn't it, suggesting that maybe there's cannibalism going on there or something along those lines? Yeah, pretty gross. So when we come out of this cave, what will be is no longer overlapped with the Diessa lowlands from Guild Wars 1, but will actually be at a place called the Flame Temple Corridor. So this is very cool. In Guild Wars 1, there were 2... Ascalon is a starter region where many players are low level. But there are 2 sections of Ascalon, the Flame Temple Corridor and the Dragon's Gullet, that played host to some very dangerous enemies. And basically the last quest of the whole game, called The Last Day Dawns on Ascalon, or Prophecies this is, involved fighting some endgame creatures, titans, here. and you would go up, and it was an easily missable location. But were you to go there, it was filled with hydras and fleshy monsters that you'd previously only seen like on the Fire Island chain. Just a really exciting, out-of-the-way part of Ascalon, filled with bubbling black tar pits. And here in Guild Wars 2, we can actually revisit this exact location, and you see that after the effects of the searing have worn away, such as they have, the water's actually fresh and clean now, and even better, if you pay attention to what you're being asked to do in this heart, it's to keep the lake clear with these chemical machines that dispense, you know, chemicals and keep the tar away and tend to the lake. I thought this was so nice because this is so clearly something for the Guild Wars 1 players who know just how messed up and just horrible this area was back in the previous game, the Flame Temple corridor. Of course, as a Flame Temple, it would have been something of a powerful location for the Flame Legion, who the current Legions do not really ally with. So you don't get to really enjoy their temple too much, but the devs still have something in store for us when we get further into the map here in a moment. The heart itself is pretty easy to do. Run around, swim, press F. I remember there being some interesting loot from this heart vendor as well. And for what it's worth, in fact, by the way, there was a Flame Legion ritual going on in that dynamic event right next to us a moment ago on an island that I swear to you exists in Guild Wars 1, which is a really cool callback. Yeah, that little base there, there's some interesting, I think there was a cow prod unique skin that you could get from that one heart. You guys would be surprised, as you play through the game, try to stay in the habit of looking at heart vendors and mousing over what they're selling and see if you have the skin unlocked. They're only asking you for a little bit of karma, which the game floods you with, so don't worry about that. Try to pick the skins up, because otherwise you'll find yourself way later deciding that you want to do cool fashion wars and spend transmutation charges and stuff, and you don't have many choices. There are a surprising number of sneaky, weird, unique little skins filtered around the hearts. Maybe there's only like one per map. Maybe there's even less than one per map. But it's worth checking the 20 or so hearts until you find a new one each time. You just got to mouse over. And they usually have some cool dialogue too. So here we are. Very special place to meet. Oh, and we're going down the hole already. Look at this. The old Grenditch Aqueduct. So this is the Grenditch Courthouse. Nothing more in the original game than a simple, quiet little outpost that you could visit on your adventure as you traveled out to the Shiver Peaks and participated in the main story. To tell you the truth, I never got to Guild Wars 1 in its earliest of days, so I never really knew this place as an outpost being really populated with players. A lot of them had moved on by the time I properly sunk my teeth in. So it's always been just this quiet, out-of-the-way, cool, extra location that's had a soft spot in my heart. But in the original game, you could only really explore the courthouse upstairs and in like a small square. That was it. There was nothing else really going on. In this game, there's all these underground areas. There's a whole aqueduct underneath. There's actually a side passage with a stairway that you can climb up into a little balcony that we have not seen. We just ran past. But deep down, there's like actually winding corridors that take you deeper into the dungeon down there. But there's no map completion for doing that. There's no events for doing that. I think there's one gathering node, but now that the economy is all where it is, there's no point to do it and go to the gathering node, which is a bit of a shame. But down there, they've got that really cool hidden entrance in the well, and here is where the courtyard itself is, these stairs. And amazingly, in Guild Wars 2, I had this experience when I first played Guild Wars 2. I walked up those stairs, recognized where I was, got the point of interest saying Grenditch Courthouse, geeked the hell out, and then I saw that the ivy on the back wall was like transparent almost, and I could walk through it. It didn't have any collision, and I found the hidden staircase and walked down there. It was just such a thrill. Really cool. Also, by the way, I mentioned a couple of episodes ago the Guild Wars 2 official strategy guide. It talks about some very funny stuff here, strategies for not getting sieged by all the ghosts that have set up their battlements on the outside and so on, which is a bit funny. I find it curious, but oh, I see where we're going. Okay, so we just ran past a big tower. There's no way on top of the tower, but here's an example of one of the very special things about Diessa in Guild Wars 2. You can activate this cannon, which will launch you through the sky, and you'll hit the tower roof. This will give you the vista there, allow you to go downstairs and do the hero challenge, which, by the way, is a guide that applies a lot of bleed to you. Now, the new game experience actually has tweaked that quite a lot. I'll tell you guys what the original version of that cannon was. Originally, there was an event that would trigger fairly regularly in which the the guy there tending to it was firing cows. Oh, was it cows or was it harpies? But he was firing them to see how far away they would land. Would they land in like this bush, or would they land in one further away, or in the trees super far away? And before he fired each cow, you could vote on which one what you thought the outcome was going to be. And not only vote, but actually bet real gold. Now, early in Guild Wars 2, a whole gold was no small amount of money. But you could bet and actually make a really tidy profit. If you were just a little bit lucky doing this. You know, maybe you spent your entire time in the Plains of Ashford saving your money and being really careful, salvaging everything, being amazing. Maybe you got a little bit lucky. Maybe you have a whole gold. Suddenly you could walk here and you could double that money. So it was a very cool betting mechanic. Nowadays, I think kind of, you know, blatant gambling and betting mechanics and stuff, there's a kind of a seedy undertone to it. A lot of people are scared of that kind of stuff. Games kind of step away from it a bit. So at some point the devs patched it so none of those events happen anymore. You can't bet, you can't try to make money. Some players do still on their account have the tokens that you could win that are worth like 2 gold or 1 gold or whatever. And that's really the only sign that it's there now. Now the cannon is always available for players just to fire onto the tower. Being able to fire yourself onto the tower was kind of only a special thing that happened at the end of the event before. But now it's always up. And that's not the only example of a betting thing in the game as well. Right near where we're standing right now, you used to be able to bet on cows. Over here, there's that event that says group exercises completed 0 of 8. You used to be able to bet on these, if I remember rightly. There was a little sequence where they would race in a ring. So there was lots going on there. Just lots of really, really cool detail on this map. And though a lot of it's been lost, I still really enjoy it. The event, the heart that we just completed a second ago as well, in the footage looked pretty lame. We were emoting at them, which I suppose is novel and fun enough. There was a Guild Wars 1 campaign mission that had you emoting at things in Nightfall and so on. So it was nice to see that come back in Guild Wars 2 and they actually play with it. Teach players what emotes are. I can certainly say Brisbane and Keswick's never had anything that detailed. But the emoting at the cows to make them happy is actually not like the main thing that you could be doing at that heart. There's a whole mini game you can play there where specific cows want to eat specific bugs, and the specific bugs can only be found in specific areas, and you're on a time limit. You got to run around gathering and throwing the right things at the right cows and matching them up and remembering where everything is in the field. And there's like 3 different difficulty modes. And I think it's there that you can get the cow prod. There's like a special currency, isn't there, for how well you're doing with that? It's a really involved Renown Heart. Really involved. Players nowadays, I think, yeah, they're just going to run off to the side, grow the plants and emote the cows and leave it. But it is fascinating. So one final thing as well about that cannon that fired the cows and we used to get onto the tower. It's interesting because you notice we hit a loading screen as we were doing that. If that were implemented into the game today, I can almost guarantee there wouldn't be a loading screen. They would use like the thermal vent mechanic or any number of mount mechanics where it would actually fire you properly through the air and land you on the tower roof. It would be way more cinematic. And one of my, you know, minor little niggles with the game, and one of the little things I'd love to see is that they actually updated that to use the new technology they clearly have. You know, I've always joked, but I could easily write a list of like 100 really stupid, inconsequential changes that I'd love to see to Guild Wars that would never earn them a cent extra, but would just make the product feel better and more cohesive and just more entertaining. And that would probably be the kind of thing that'd get on that list. So, moving down towards the south now, we're actually heading back towards the Black Citadel. This Renown Heart's very easy if you participate in the event back there. That event has actually been hooked into multiple Living World releases and stuff as the years have gone along, so I'm still very familiar with it. Or you can run in these long lines, lighting the torches up and trying to get the haunting away. The story around there is actually really, really interesting. They kind of find a way to dissipate the ghosts, albeit temporarily. And on a more long-term scale than what we can already do to dissipate the ghosts temporarily, which is fight them. And there's actually lots of weird little elements. Here we're running right up to the north node on the hatchery, by the way, which is Living World Season 1 update, but added a new map objective that we have to get Diessa, which is kind of funny. But yeah, there's lots of little things in this map, in this general area of the world that kind of talk about, you know, new technologies to get rid of the ghosts that the main story's never really touched on. Right before that portal a second ago, we were in kind of a junkyard. So this is actually the ruins of Nolani. That it was a great institute for magical learning or for the Ascalonians. For a long time, there was a whole mission there in the original game. In Nightfall, a very remote region of the world, way down south in Alona, there were actually Ascalonian ghosts still talking about how great that place was. And what is it, 250 years ago? 250 years later? A junkyard filled with rubble and gears and pollution next to the collapsed wall. I think that's so beautiful. And even better, to top it off, hidden within there, if you do some special jumping, you can actually find a hidden pipe that you walk through. Takes you to a whole hidden section of the map where there's a little char that loves to garden, and it's a very, very beautiful sort of lost in time, secluded glen, where there's also strawberries that you can gather. Strawberries being something of a rare commodity for a very, very, very brief time when the game first came out. So basically, if you found a really hidden place and you could gather something there, it might have been strawberries, and you might have been able to get some money on the TP from it. But information propagates, and of course, what is it the Asura say? Knowledge propagates. And of course, nothing secret is held for long, and the economy always balances. Okay, so this is quite cool. We are doing Assist the Blood Legion, one of the most boring descriptions for a heart, or names for a heart. And I always get stuck here too. This might look really passive and lame and dumb. This heart is in desperate need of an update. Of all the hearts in Guild Wars 2, this one is consistently empty. There are some events that can trigger, and in fact you might be seeing ones about to trigger here with these Separatists, which will help you get progress, but quite often you'll come here and there's almost nothing you can do to progress this damn thing. You can wander around picking up metal bars and escorting them way back towards the entrance of the Black Citadel. You can disable mines, I think, but there's just not much going on. This event is really the be-all and end-all, and I think this footage is very lucky that this event is actually triggered here. Even then, look, we kill a Separatist, you get a tiny little bit of progress. Not the least amount that I've seen, by quite a long way, but it is still a small amount of progress. In a lot of ways, I respect ArenaNet for having done such a small amount of progress. This is the way I feel like the game should be, but because the rest of the game is not like this feels like a slog and an aberration. So, you know, a lot of the times, it's not about what's right, it's about what's consistent. And that's probably a good example of that there. Moving over now to another little cave section with Flame Legion. This always reminds me of the one that we did up on the top left earlier. We just need to grab the POI there. And you've got kind of a fun little thing here where there are Separatists and there are Flame Legion, who are both kind of enemy factions of the Char cause, the High Legion cause at the moment. So you can pit them against one another and be sneaky and do spy things. There's actually a method of getting like permanent stealth against these guys so that you can infiltrate and sabotage them. Unlike the infiltration / sabotage thing we saw in the previous video at Brisbane, this one is not so well done. I mean, we're certainly not as merciful, I'll tell you that much. And maybe that makes sense because we are a Char now, rather than a Sylvari. Maybe were they expecting Sylvari to be merciful when they went into that camp, or were they expecting you to be humans? It's weird because Brisbane is only a connector map for Asura and Sylvari, and yet it also kind of has that big bandit thing going on. So it. And in the lore, it's really about the melting pot of the humans too. Even though most player humans probably just go from Keswick straight into Gendarin. They probably don't spend much time in Brisbane. Their personal stories certainly don't ask them to. So anyway, killing things at the camp. Very new, very novel. Not really much happening here. We'll be moving in a second to a region of the map that has a really cool jumping puzzle. So many of the Ascalon jumping puzzles. If you saw my previous video in one of the Ascalon areas for map completion, you heard me talking about this. But it's the Ascalon jumping puzzles. I remember being so hard at the start and taking so long. And you can see videos of me doing them blind with Mike on this channel. You can see our first experiences of them. You can see me take like an hour to do the jumping puzzle we're about to walk past. But these days, you know, I could do it in, I mean, it's not an exaggeration, 4 minutes, less than that. And it's not even, you know, it's a completely different plane of existence when you repeat these jumping puzzles. And that's one of the reasons I quite like that they actually put them on the dailies in the end, because you get to flex the skill you learned, you know. You very much learn a skill with these. There's actually 2 jumping puzzles in this map, or rather, in the open world as we adventure through, there are jumping puzzles that you can find. By the way, another kind of candidate like the diving goggle thing I mentioned before. But also, there are explorable areas or explorer achievements, which are like not necessarily jumping puzzles, but just as jumping puzzles take you to well-crafted, hidden out of the way areas of the world, Explorer achievements are just that. They're that minus all the jumping. And there's one of those on this map too, which is kind of hidden. Usually the thing is, the way that the devs hide an area is through obscure platforming mechanics, so they end up, you know, the wires get crossed a lot. We just unlocked a little town there, the town of Nagling, I think it's called. That is one of the very rare and few locations you can find a giant in the core world. I was actually very much expecting it to be spawned and rampaging around, because at the end of the day, who's able to clear those out? But it looked like it was all clean and sorted. This is a garden. This is garden heart. Very easy to finish, you see. We're just bucketing most of the weeds here and moving on. But there's a ton of different things you can do. You can mess with the grubs. You can pick weeds. You can, you know, tend to various flowers and things. There is a full-on gardening feature in the game now through Ascended Cooking and the Black Lion store. And you can get, like, garden plots and stuff in your home instance. But those mechanics... I don't know, there's someone doing the roller beetle race for this map there, by the way, warping past. I've always loved that since they've added these. You can have just regular people on regular adventures, and now roller beetles go rocketing past you. It's so, so good. You know, that's a different guy on a different quest doing something else. It's lovely. Which you don't get much in Guild Wars, because mostly people just waypoint around. Yeah, the other gardening feature is not as fun as that heart. I kind of wish that they'd looked at that heart a little bit more when they implemented the new stuff. Because going back to my home instance each day and tending to that garden in the same way that that heart becomes overgrown and has all the different animations and things for the states of whether the plants have been tended to or not would be brilliant. And they have it there already. But I guess when they did the Black Lion and the Ascended Cooking, they were much more all business about it. And it's more about just giving the players their rewards. That's why they're there, right? So yeah, this is probably the trickiest part of the jumping puzzle, and you're actually going to see us participate in it. We're not going to be stopping to get the lore from the letters and stuff, but you are going to see us do this because, unlike with most jumping puzzles, this one doesn't just give an achievement of a reward, there is map completion tied to it. I've always wondered about this because it seems like ArenaNet made a formal decision at some point to say, we will not force people to do jumping puzzles. We'll have them as optional things with chests that give them loot, and then it's just 2 blues and a green, so it's actually really ignorable. And we'll give you an achievement, which again is just cosmetic, so it's ignorable. So it seems like that's what they did almost everywhere consistent in the game, but sometimes, rarely, and most prominently here because there's 2 things, they'll put a map completion objective here. So what are they trying to say to people? You should do these? It's a bit, this map is the same as what I was talking about with Brisbane as well. It's right around that time where people are looking for more experiences, and they're still absorbing a lot of what the game is, and they're learning, and they're trying to figure out what the patterns of play are. And so it is an excellent place to do this, to put a jumping puzzle there and say, hey, do this. You might not enjoy it, but do it at least once. I want to see whether you like it, and if you do, then I can probably expect you're going to play my game more because you're going to be going for all the other ones that I've made. Do it. You know, so they give you a Vista and a hero challenge there. There's also the other side of it to consider, which is what I was talking about the other day. At one point, Guild Wars 2 was not being made with the notion that world completion was the be-all and end-all. It kind of is to a lot of us now, but at one point it wasn't, and so then maybe it's much more forgivable that they put a couple of elements up here, because they're not expecting everyone to get all of them anyway. You know, they're just expecting you to be up here to level and have fun and just kind of almost aimlessly wander around until you want to do more personal story. And that's what they're thinking. So, we actually do not have this heart done here. I guess, yeah, I was going to say, I would have been very surprised to stick about and actually kill the champion there. But you'll see, even as a champion scale mob, he looked very, very doable. One of the nice benefits of being a Mesmer, especially since the Phantasm change, in which once the Phantasm uses its ability, it swaps to a clone. You can make sure that enemies are focusing on the wrong thing for too long. This is actually quite clever here. We're moving completely away and just trying to deal with enemies in a different place. So this is the barn where they have respawned. There's a couple of events around here where the Separatists set up siege and stuff. This area I have a very fond memory of. Once upon a time, I did a video on Valentine's Day. Why did I do this video? But those chickens, one part of that heart is you pick the chickens up and you take them back in to the farm because they're like wandering away, or you shoo the cows back into the farm. And the funny thing is, when you pick a chicken up, it's like an environmental object. Nice little tag there on actually what is a really tanky hero challenge. You look at that hero challenge is tanky, and so when we wander over it, the chance that someone's already doing it is much higher. And so then I might have interacted with them and said, hey, thanks, or whatever. But there you have it. That's a tanky hero challenge, and someone else helped us with it. Did basically the whole thing before we came along and tagged it. Back to the chickens. When you pick them up, they are basically environmental objects, so they scale with the size of your character. And it looks very funny to be on a Norn, pick up a chicken. You get these enormous chickens, like bigger than a whole Asura, like ridiculously fat birds. And I did a video holding it, which I was probably... I mean, I don't think I'm a funny person, even remotely, right? Like, not even a tiny little bit. And I very rarely try to be funny. I'm too cowardly to try and be funny. But I will say, I think, in my own estimation, the funniest thing I have ever done on this website is that stupid chicken video. But I can't remember why I did it. It was a long time ago now, guys. So here's an example of the whole sniping, sieging thing. Another Separatist-related event. But this one actually works because it's very, very specifically tied to the heart. So you can actually snipe them down, but it's kind of fiddly in how it works. Like that, for example, he's walking away, so we miss. But you see it's designed that they actually get one shot. So even though they probably would regen... there, look, you can see. Even though they do regen, they take so much damage you can finish them off. And look at that 5 bleed as well. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence or an accident that 5 bleeds on there. I feel like that's a really fiddly thing that's been added to counteract the regen. You know? And obviously the regen was powering even through that, but we don't know what the game's balance was like at the time. Maybe the regen wasn't so strong when the 5 bleed was added and the numbers worked out perfectly. And then over time... you know, the amount of damage that bleed did changed, or the amount of damage that, or the amount of regeneration came in changed. My guess would be that when the devs first added that regeneration thing, they did it very conservatively, and then only later they realized they had to go a bit harder. There's the roller beetle course again. Look how fast they move. That's awesome. And if you're wondering if it's awesome to see from the roller beetle's perspective, it definitely is. You could check out some of the videos I did on that as it came out. One of my favorite achievement things to go for, honestly. And this was a cool course too. So yeah, I mean, it's just a bit unfortunate, but one of the wonkiest things about just playing this game out in the open world is when you tag something, but for some reason, it's really out of position in terms of, like, it's really far away from where it spawned, and so suddenly it breaks and it starts regenerating really quickly. I wonder if way back when ArenaNet first implemented it, they wanted it to be a shallow regeneration, just so that moments like that wouldn't be too annoying. And then we got what we got in the end, which is that it actually is super annoying. I never really do this event with a trained scout like this, just interacting with them that way. I usually hang around near their nests or try and kill stealthed ones. I will openly admit that takes me a lot longer than usual, than this has here. So here we're actually over another Guild Wars 1 map. This would be the Breach. So in Guild Wars 1, when you get to post-searing Ascalon, there is a moment where you finally go north of the wall after the searing, and it's called the Breach. It's very exciting there. It's very scary, very deadly. It looks totally different here, but that hole is just behind us. That break in the wall is still there, still exists in Guild Wars 2, and you could use it as an alternate entrance to actually get back down into the plains of Ashford there. But yeah, this is a hidden little cave here I often forget about, but is a part of map completion. Exactly, this is almost exactly how they do it in Metrica Province as well. In Metrica Province, at the bottom right of the map is a shallow inlet of water like this with a bridge going over it, except in Metrica Province, the bridge is, you know, floating platforms. And to the right, if you swim in the water, you can go through some kelp into a hidden cave. Like, word almost perfectly matches up. The aesthetic is just different. So both this map and Metrica have that same thing going on. Metrica doesn't ask you to go into its cave for map completion, so it wasn't on that video. Also, we have this section here, which is really tricky. It's leading to a vista. And I always struggle finding these rocks and being able to climb up here. I don't know what it is. Just really, really, really struggle. I also kind of confuse running along this wall with running along the equivalent wall down south in the plains of Ashford. They feel really similar to me. You know, you get all these little troll caves and things off on the side. Doesn't it feel sort of the same? You know, like that hidden extra cave in the very top right on the plains of Ashford. But this area of the map's about to get really, really badass. The top rightmost corner of the map is the location of another meta event. So there's actually 3 metas on this map. Yeah, this is a full meta. So there's 3 metas on this one, very special. Flame Legion battles. Now, this meta deals with the Flame Legion attacking 2 of the big Char outposts up here. One of them is called Bloodsore Mill. And you are essentially building your own warband by petitioning various Char in the area with mini events. So, like, they have different jobs to do and they don't really want to fight alongside you. So you help them out with their jobs. You form your own warband, and the warband storms up here to the Incendio Templum. And once you've done that, and you do a bunch of events here to capture this location, which, by the way, makes this heart very easy. As we're watching the footage here, this has already been done. They open a portal that goes to a whole, like, I'm going to use the word mini dungeon, but it's not really a mini dungeon. The only reason I have to say mini dungeon is because it's not a full-fledged interior space with its own map and explorables and stuff like the rest of the Guild Wars 2 dungeons. There's a dungeon that you go to here, really? And then there's all kinds of puzzles and fun things to do with that before finally you get a boss at the end, who, for what it's worth, wasn't really that valuable to fight at launch, but post-launch, they added some loot to him, which ties into a really rare collection. Gives you a treasure chest in your home instance, sells for a ton on the trading post. So it's just a super, super worthwhile, amazing area of the game. A real pleasure to explore. And you can see on the minimap right now, there's an arrow that actually is pointing to it. You will see the outside of the dungeon elsewhere on the map. We will visit that because there'll be a vista and stuff, so you'll see it. But the only way to actually get in there is through that portal. It's a lot like at Metrica, where there were all those Asura gates that allowed you access to places on very different areas of the map. Similar situation. Yeah, I think we've actually done quite well managing to collect all this heart progress, even without the events going on. The events here are very, very large, you know. Because it's the end of a meta event, it tends to be a lot of players have congregated around, so they scale up a lot, so there'll be a lot of enemies around. And it's kind of like a double assault in that heart, there's an upper area you need to assault and defend, and a lower area that you need to assault and defend. Nice little touch there, actually handing the relics in to the renowned vendor. I don't usually do that. Here we've got the old Haltim Abbey, which sounds like it's some kind of direct Guild Wars 1 reference. There were abbeys and, you know, old citadels and stuff like that, but it actually isn't overlapping with anything in Guild Wars 1 here, so just a weird thought that when we were playing in Pre-Searing Ascalon, there was a place called the Haltim Abbey nearby, but we could never visit it. And when we finally can, it's 250 years later and it's kind of destroyed. Yeah. So who knows what the story there would have been. It's not the Ashford Abbey, if you're thinking of that. That will be in the previous map, where we were actually exploring in one of the mini dungeon areas. Probably could have done a bit better to talk about that at the time, but it was one of the first videos, so a little bit less time to talk about the Guild Wars 1 stuff. Yeah. So yeah, the Bloodsore Mill itself, where that whole meta starts, they're called the Night Warband, by the way, is here, and you've got to complete this. Quite a lot of different opportunities of things to do here. Cutting down trees, you're probably familiar with just from regular gathering, but you can pick up this backpack with these grenades, throw it at the wasps. Something really satisfying about this. Especially if you've been playing a character like a warrior that doesn't really have many ground targets in the early game. Suddenly you've got these grenades, it really, really feels very distinct and different. I say that because as a Char, I usually kind of lean towards warriors if I'm doing challenge playthroughs and stuff like that. It just fits so well. The first Char I actually ever played was a thief, so it doesn't quite line up. So yeah, then we get these two buildings, and the further along of them, the one that's just on our left here, doesn't really have anything to do. No map completion or anything there, right? There's just like a repair and a weaponsmith and armorsmith. If you go in there, there's a lot of Char around, and the Char deliver a ton of ambient dialogue if you are willing to wait long enough. Most of the ambient dialogue on this map is all in that area, and there's no reason for players to go there. No events or no map completion stuff, but they talk about some even really important things, like Geheron Balefire, who eventually is, you know, defeated throughout the course of the personal story and the dungeon storyline. There's some of the earliest times you hear about him and discussions about him are here. This is where players should be learning, but I can... You know, if you gave me 10,000 Guild Wars 2 players at launch who went through this map, maybe like 50 or 60 of them would have heard that dialogue, and they all should have. So that was wild, and one of the things I was really happy to include in my LP. You actually get everything that the devs probably wanted you to get. Except, you know, just without the constraints and realities of it not happening. So back through what was once a tar lake, up through the Flame Temple corridor. We can now see the dungeon itself on the outside. It's a truly beautiful area. There's a little mower that run around here. This is a great place to get bonus XP. And there's a waypoint first, and then there is a vista on the head of this creature. Look at this, with all the water coming down. You can actually speak to a character outside the front door there, who sort of suggests, hey, maybe there's another way in. I think this place looks amazing. So atmospheric. And I'm a little bit thirsty as I record right now, so the water it feels extra special somehow. Oh, I wish we'd watched that vista. That would have been really nice. But there you go, that's Diessa Plateau complete. The Tyrian Explorer Society thanks us. And that is the opening of the char stuff done. So join me next time, guys, for probably Kessex. Thanks for watching. Let me know your memories, and I'll see you next time.